This is the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing? I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Talk about living a charmed life. James and Dorothy Freeman were both born with incredible talent. He was a pianist, conductor, and bass player. She was an oboist. They were lucky enough to meet and spend a lifetime making music together, from Tanglewood to Boston to Philadelphia and beyond, which happens to be the name of their phenomenal autobiography.
It starts out at Tanglewood, the big music center in the Berkshires. We were students there. And then I was invited to play in a concert of the Springfield Symphony in which Dorothy was a solo oboist, and I was really impressed. And she then went to play in the National Symphony of Peru. I was then a student at Harvard College, and she came back from Peru and she won a job in the Pittsburgh Symphony, and I graduated from Harvard College. And after she played for a year in the Pittsburgh Symphony, she accepted a Fulbright scholarship to Germany, and she spent a year and a half there while I had a Harvard fellowship to study in Vienna. And the amazing thing about it is that we did so many things together, and that's why it's called Making Music Together. After her Fulbright, she came back to the U.S. We were married, and then she went back to play in the Pittsburgh Symphony. And this was in the early 60s. I thought we should be living together, so I asked her to resign from the Pittsburgh Symphony, and she did with a lot of misgivings because she was really happy there. I was offered an instructorship at Swarthmore College outside of Philadelphia, and we decided that was a better long-range thing for both of us, since it was close to Philadelphia, and she would be doing a lot of playing in Philadelphia, and I would be teaching at Swarthmore and also doing a lot of playing and conducting. And while there are many, many stories about Swarthmore College, about our playing in Philadelphia, at a certain point I decided there was a great dearth of contemporary classical music being played in Philadelphia at that time, and so I formed an orchestra, and it's called Orchestra 2001. And Orchestra 2001 plays a major part in the book because we gave more than 300 concerts in not only Philadelphia and Swarthmore, where we were the ensemble in residence. We gave concerts in Carnegie Hall. We gave concerts in Moscow. We gave concerts in St. Petersburg, in Denmark, in England, at the Salzburg Festival, and at the Library of Congress, all over the place. I had a Fulbright teaching fellowship at the Moscow Conservatory in 1991, and that paved the way for our association with Russian musicians and with the Moscow Conservatory. And so in 1993, we were invited to give a series of concerts at the Moscow Conservatory. It was in October 1993. And as we arrived, a revolution broke out in the city of Moscow. And it was a very scary situation for everybody. People were killed in front of the apartment where we lived, but finally, after about 6 days, the revolution was quelled, was stopped, and we gave our series of 3 concerts. We came back to Moscow in 94, and again in 1997, this time in St. Petersburg, as well as Moscow, and then we traveled to Denmark, and then came home. We played all over the world. While we were doing that, during the summers, I was playing in the Boston Pops for 20 summers with Arthur Fiedler, then with John Williams, then with Keith Lockhart as conductors. And meanwhile, Dorothy was playing all that time in the Philly Pops, whose conductor then was Peter Nero. But the Philly Pops didn't give concerts all summer long as the Boston Pops did. So we had bought a beautiful little cottage on a lake in Concord, Massachusetts. For some more than 50 summers, we lived at this little cottage on a beautiful, pristine lake with our 2 children who lived like Huckleberry Finn on the lake during all those summers. Meanwhile, during the winters, for 50 years, we were playing in the Philadelphia Opera Orchestra. I, a bass player, she is an oboist. So our lives were very much involved with music of all kinds. We would often say, geez, it's amazing because we're playing the greatest music ever written, by the most wonderful composers who have ever lived, including our own composers of this time, and we're getting paid for it. And that, what could be more amazing than doing that together? So there you are.
There you are, James. What a great story. And there's so much more in their book, Making Music Together. The pandemic changed the way we do a lot of things. For some people, it was realizing how little time we spent with family and friends. For John Condi, a math and science teacher in Georgia, he was inspired to write a children's book for kids returning to school and the new normal after 2 years of not knowing if they'd ever go back to the classroom. The name of his book, Malik Returns to School.
So the way the story goes is Malik is in school and it starts off, hey, just like many other schools, he has to go to school through Zoom. His parents are working from home. It's just this real big change. There's a lot of real life situations he has no control over. So he kind of looks at the positive things that happens in his life to give him strength, to give him motivation and encourage him to make the next big step, was to get back into real life school face-to-face learning. Malik is sixth grader, so he's probably around 12, 13 years old. He's a middle schooler, definitely a middle schooler. But kids from first grade all the way to 12th grade can relate to Malik.
Going through the pandemic?
Yes, exactly. And when they read the book, they can relate to his experiences.
At the end of the day, does Malik find it better to be in school than to be on Zoom?
Yes, he does. It takes him a while, and he is getting to where he's comfortable returning to the face-to-face learning. But that might be the next adventure on how comfortable he is to return to in school. So it didn't really give away that information in the book. It leaves the reader to come to their own conclusion. I don't really give that answer. But like I say, I do think that a lot of kids can come to that conclusion, or even parents. I leave it up to the parents to answer that question for the kids reading the book. I plan on writing a series of books to cover how he eventually gets back to school and whether or not he's successful in the classroom, returning face-to-face learning, and possibly some more challenges he faces, like maybe bullying or controlling his emotions, or challenges with peers or making friends. Because kids like Malik especially, they're used to being on their own for so long, and then all of a sudden you're in a classroom full of kids, and a lot of them are very vocal and want to know, hey, why are you wearing this? And, the normal sixth grade stuff. And Malik is just like everybody else. The pandemic caused a lot of other social issues. People weren't working full time. A lot of employment agencies had to lay off. Maybe he couldn't afford the in fashion clothes and the in fashion shoes coming back to school. And there's other priorities that parents have to make sacrifices to be able to provide for Malik. So I definitely think there's a need to put out more books similar to the one I wrote, Malik Returns to School, because kids need to read about, they're not the only ones going through things. And I also have curriculum that goes with the book online that English teachers can download. And there's vocabulary words. There's a science experiment about mask. You test which mask is most effective and come up with which mask would be safer to wear, to make it a learning experience also.
That is such a great idea, John. I'm really looking forward to see what you do with the rest of the series. Thank you. Nobody tells a story like Eileen Finn Loving, an RN for 52 years. She came to the U.S. from Ireland, and a doctor she worked with encouraged her to write, even bought her a bound notebook to get her started. She has now completed her second book in a trilogy entitled Angela's Purse. So bring us up to speed.
The first book was called The Clothesline, and it was based really on my fascination with Irish damp weather and the people's fixation of drying the clothes outside, even if you own a dryer. I mean, that's just what you do. You hang them out. God forbid you put it into a dryer, shame on you.
It's got to take forever for stuff to dry over there.
Forever. So it was in, it was out. There was a language built all around it, soaking wet, sopping wet, bone dry. I mean, really, it was very important how you spoke about your clothes. Okay. So as I was writing it began to dawn on me through the character, that a clothesline is like a day in our life. But sometimes your day doesn't have a nice thing. And unlike a clothesline where if it's torn, you can discard it or whatever, things happen in your life that you cannot discard. You have to deal with them. So the clothesline took a little twist. And now the second book, Angela's Purse, is a sequel to that. The main character in the first book is a 10-year-old child. And we're following her through a cancer treatment. Okay. And she's on her way and doing very well. So that's the sequel. So Angela's Purse is called that because the people of the town of Baybridge, which is very tightly based on my hometown of Sligo, the people were just very generous with her and set up a foundation by a man one day who said, "Are they collecting money for the little girl? Well, where's the purse?" And it became Angela's Purse. I mean, that's loosely how that came about. So it's following her through and how her neighbors helped her and her own and her sister, she's 10, her sister is 6, how their simplicity just made it easier on the adults. They were actually the strong ones. It was just amazing to watch them develop and how they would simplify everything. Children have a very simple way and uncomplicated, like you don't have to climb Mount Kilimanjaro to get there. You know, you could just go in a straight line and there it is. So they taught the adults to just take it easy. Just let's go this way. Yeah. There's another big thing that came to mind with me too, is the relationship between doctors and nurses. Her GP, Dr. Owen, is a very, very astute, kind man. And he understood the relationship between the doctor and the nurse and the rest of his staff. And he states that he would be useless as a doctor and be not effective at all if he didn't have respect and trust, especially for his nursing staff, because, you know, doctors write orders and they walk away. It's the nurses that carry them out. And if they're not carried out correctly at the bedside or in the home or wherever you are, you will not have a good outcome. So really, his success with his patients was very dependent on his nursing staff. So that was something that I had thought about subconsciously for years, but the pen allowed me to get it out there, which was quite nice. A few foundations actually sprung out of the fundraising for this girl. And she subsequently actually becomes a doctor herself and a pediatric oncologist.
So the little girl does make it.
Yes, she does.
And we find out how this impacted her life as it unfolds.
Absolutely, indeed. Indeed, yeah. And those around her, yes.
All right, Eileen, thank you. Bob Deal had a knack for new food ideas, so much so after opening a couple of bakeries, he was called on to do desserts for some well-known food chains. In his book, Screw the Diet, Bon Appetit, he tells us how to make a triple chocolate meltdown and blondie served in a skillet with maple cream sauce.
Yeah, they're in the book, but not under those names. It's a muffin. And it's a mini bun with mousse and icing goes over the top of the bundt cake, and then white cream cheese, icing on top, and ice cream. And the other one is blondie brownie with some of the chips melted into the batter so that it gives it an extra big flavor. And then cream cheese sauce comes from one of my other recipes in the book, but they're all in there under a different, under the original name. A mini bun, cream cheese sauce, all those things. And my story of beginning the bakery in the first place is also there from the Los Angeles Times. And it was a wonderful story. And then synopsis of my life, and it was my granddaughter did that story, and it was very exciting and acceptable from the people that bought the book. They loved the story. Beautiful pictures of various desserts like cakes and muffins. But the recipe is in both metric and in home style. They're comparable, and the directions are in there. And
Right. Do you have a favorite story in the book?
well, probably the one about my life. I founded a bakery called Good Stuff Bakery in 1970 of all whole grain breads. After I learned how to bake bread, I changed some of the formulas and got a magnificent bread. It sold, the sales went through the sky. And then I sold that to a larger company, started a second one after 3 years. It's called Big Deal. Sounds like a used car lot, but basically it was everything but bread. It was cookies, muffins, brownies, salad dressings, and ice cream for change. After that, I sold it. I went to Kansas City from Venice, California, to do desserts for a chain of restaurants that they had bought after 10-year requirement from Pizza Hut. He was the founder of Pizza Hut, Dan Carney, and he wanted me to do their desserts, which I did. It was very successful. One of the first and the biggest chain that I did this for is Applebee's. It went from 300 or 400 restaurants to 2,500 restaurants. And it's still on the menu. Triple chocolate meltdown and the blondie served in a skillet with maple cream cheese sauce poured over it and sizzled in a skillet.
If I go to Applebee's, will Applebee's put a copy of your book out there so people can see it?
No,
They should.
I know they should. There's absolutely should, but no, they won't because they don't want to be known that they're not the ones that developed the recipes for those two items.
Well, we know now, Bob, and no wonder you say screw the diet. I feel like I put on 10 pounds just listening to this. Thank you. An aircraft mechanic in Virginia, William Mahler, started his spiritual journey over 3 decades ago and finally found the time to write about it in his book, Seeking Community, A Spiritual Journey.
The original motivation was trying to come up with a definitive decision about the difference between spirituality and religion. And it just progressed from there as I grew and understood more. And this is my wording about my life journey after I started looking at my life.
What were some of the things that you found?
The importance of community is a big one. The difference between religion and spirituality, the connection to everything, our connection to everything is spiritual. That's inclusive of religion, but it's not just religion that is spiritual. All of our connections with everything is spiritual. My connection with my children, with my parents, my wife. Actually, it comes right down to it, my connection with you, because we have created a connection in this conversation. A connection with a God is spiritual. Connection with a church is spiritual. But the entity is not spiritual. It's the connection of everything that we connect with in life that is spiritual. The stories that I share in the book are basically my interpretation of my life journey. So whatever I share in the book is my personal journey. It's the only truth I have. It's the only truth any of us have is our own personal interpretation of our personal life journey.
Is there something that sticks out about your life journey? A major turning point in your life? A time when your spirituality was questioned?
My spirituality was questioned throughout my life until I started this journey of personal introspection about 32 years ago. And at that point, life started changing. My perception of life, the meaning of life, started changing. And it has been a 32-year journey to this point and continuing, I might add, because we all learn something about ourselves if we look pretty much every day. If we're open to the perception or the conception of our life journey. There are two types of people in the world: seekers and those that fall at the master's feet. Whatever the master is, anything that stops us from seeking. One thing that I specifically mentioned in there is addiction. Makes no difference what the addiction might be. It's not the substance, it's the addiction itself, it's the behavior. And what stops us from seeking is believing. Once I believe in something, makes no difference what it is, that's the end of the road for that particular item. I'm going to stop looking or seeking anything more about that. I'm just going to hold a belief. So at this point in my life, I am doing my best not to use the term I believe in anything.
All right, William, fair enough. Thank you. Andrew Patterson brings us a horror novel entitled The Dead Files, in which he follows two men from the Grateful Dead parking lot to the jam shed and off into the Vale. He calls it a book about the dead, the Grateful Dead, the soon-to-be dead, written by a dead man. Andrew, explain.
It's kind of political satire. Basically, the last 5 years, pretty much. Plus, mixed into this story. I mean, when you're an author, you got to draw from your life, use that, in your writing, right? I mean, Edgar Allan Poe wrote the Pit and the Pendulum, and all this stuff is about the Civil War, House of Usher, about manufacturing, munitions manufacturers and all this kind of stuff, right? In a kind of a poetry horror novel. Wouldn't say I'm Edgar Allan Poe. This is my first book.
Well, Edgar Allan Poe was severely affected by the amount of opioids he was doing too, right?
Right. And there's a lot of drug use in this book. It starts off with the main character dying, going to hell. And then, I use stories from my own life that I've embellished and put together this book. It's kind of like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas / with Dante's Inferno. All right, I use a lot of metaphors, drug metaphors, and so on. I was a big Grateful Dead fan back in the day. So, anyways, right in the beginning, he dies. And then, crazy stuff happens. Ends up getting arrested by the police, and it goes into this kind of like thing about rights, Bill of Rights, and so on, yada, yada.
Why does he get arrested?
It's actually a true story. It actually happened to me. I was sitting and writing next to a 7-Eleven, and I got arrested.
For what?
That was it.
Loitering?
Guess. I don't know. Well, he goes to jail. He gets out. And then, he goes through the storyline. He goes down this highway to hell. Basically, he starts out at a Grateful Dead show. He's dead. He's there with a bunch of Grateful Dead people. They're all dead. And then gets a vial of acid from the Queen of Sheba and heads down the highway to hell. And then there's all these things, runs into the KKK and the skinheads, and all ends up, all this stuff, and it ends up with him at a jam shed by himself. And then it goes into what I call the Veil. He runs into aliens out in the woods, and they give him a plan to save the world. Shows up, works at a radio station in Portland. And I worked at a radio station in Portland for a short period of time. Like I said, a basis off of my life, kind of. And then, it's all environmental stuff. Solar panels, electric cars, bullet trains, reforestation, turning seawater into fresh water and building hydroelectric dams, regrowing deserts into rainforests, stuff like that. And it ends with him getting arrested again, going to jail, and then getting beat up by a demon that works for Satan or whatever, where they're making oil out of people. And we drive around. This is, like I said, it's in hell, but it's based on reality.
Okay. Well, it's been said that we're living in hell. And when you die, that's when things get good. So.
Yeah, I know it. They say that. It's about the spirituality, honest to God, of the world itself, all of us, this connection to nature and animals and, the environment. It's a series. I've already written the pages for the next book. I'm just going to have to put it all together and rewrite it another 7 times like I did with this one.
I hear you, Andrew, but that's what they say. Writing is rewriting. All right, I'm going to leave you with Michael Egbert, retired Houston cop and prolific writer for Page. He has published 5 books, including Doc and JD, Houston's own dynamic duo, American Cop in Bosnia, 1968, and Special Crime Attack Team. Now, he's back with his 5th book and his first work of fiction entitled The Legend of Bob.
Well, it's about a couple. They're very much in love, and suddenly a cat appears, and everything changes from that point on. They had a dog, and the cat and the dog became inseparable. He becomes a legend because in the story, the dog is kind of small. It's kind of was a run of the litter, and it was out in the backyard, and an eagle came down and tried to pick it up.
Oh,
And the cat immediately pounced on that eagle and killed it, and that's what made him into a legend. Jumped on the back of the eagle and nearly bit its head off because he was protecting his buddy.
what kind of dog?
German pointer. She was a runt of the litter, and of course, eagles, they do pick up some pretty good, large animals. In the book, she's only about 14, 15 pounds worth of dog. And I did a little research on this, called a few vets, and I asked them, could this be possible? And I said, sure, it could. But a cat jumping on an eagle like that took a lot of courage, because the eagle would have turned around and killed the cat. This couple that got this dog to be used as a retriever, because the man, he liked to go hunting for birds and pheasant, stuff like that, and he wanted a dog to retrieve for him. Well, it turned out the dog sucked at retrieving, but the cat jumped in there and took over. I had a friend years ago that he was a hunter, and this cat showed up at his window and during a blizzard, so I incorporated that into my story. But his cat wasn't anywhere near the legend of my Bob is. So, in fact, the cover photo is actually a picture of my own cat. She doesn't know it, but she posed as a male cat.
Uh-oh, don't tell her.
No, I won't tell her that. I don't want her getting mad at me or anything.
All right, how's it doing? How's the book doing?
This one seems to be doing real well among the female population out here, because I guess it's because of the love story part of it. I have people standing in line waiting to buy it.
What do you got, a fan club?
Everything I've written so far, everybody likes. They keep bugging me and sending me emails. Is that come out yet? Come out yet?
Michael, I hope you know how lucky you are, You are proof of what can happen to a writer when you stick to it. Let people in your area, which is Iowa, know what you're writing. And then you start building a little fan base. And next thing you know, people are lined up waiting for your next book. I mean, that's saying something. All right, that is it for this edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. Download the podcast at 710WOR.com. Thanks for joining us. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. I'll catch you next time.